But if they're poor children, we incarcerate them. If they're children of my friends, they go to military school or they get counseling, and they're treated as beloved children. But one of the initiatives in California, and we have this ridiculously dysfunctional government, one of the initiatives in California was, I forget which, Prop 19 something, but it was going to give prosecutors more discretion to charge more children as adults. And this was the first time that I saw urban core kids organizing politically on their own to fight an initiative. And it was the most amazing thing. Books Not Bars. It's a wonderful group up in Oakland. Our bias against San Francisco is so absolute, it's just obscene. I was trying to figure out how many San Franciscos can fit in LA, and I stopped at 15. So, but you do have some marvelous grassroots groups, and what we do as civil rights lawyers, we cannot do it without the co-pilots you fund. We have some of the best. They're not clients, they're co-pilots, because our cases are and were about systemic social change. We're not servicing a client, we are changing a system. And you can't do it without highly resourced grassroots groups. And Books Not Bars was one of those groups. And they called us. It wasn't a bunch of civil rights lawyers saying, oops, we got to organize some kids and put them out there as parsley in front. These were the kids who called us and said, we need to know how you go from protest to politics. And so Anthony Thigpen came up, I came up, Miguel Contreras was up there. And this one youngster, and as I said, I don't talk to kids very often, so I know I must look like E.T. to them. But this one youngster, he had the baggy pants, and he had the rolled-up cap, and he had the sunglasses, and he's like, yo, lady lawyer. And I thought, oh, what an honorific title. That's wonderful. So I turned to him, and I said, yes, son? And he says, can I talk to you for a minute? You know, and the kids move. I mean, you know, and I'm, you know, and you know, we're very kind of stiff and boring, but this kid's moving, back in your day, and I'm trying to keep up with him. You know, back in your day, you know, when you was running with that King dude, and I'm thinking, okay. And he says, well, you know, when you was fighting Jim Crow with that King dude. And I said, he's heard of Jim Crow? Oh my gosh. And he says, this jail shit is my Jim Crow. I was high. I didn't even need a gin and tonic. That kid sent me into orbit. I mean, I was like, oh, he's heard of the systemic oppression of Jim Crow, and he understands, post-Reconstruction, and he's connected the political dots to the systems that are trying to grind him into. I said, yes, son, yes, this is your Jim Crow. It wasn't until I got to the car that I said, Jim Crow? He thinks I'm old enough to afford Jim Crow? I was 12 years old when King was murdered. And he had heard of Martin Luther King. I said, oh, hallelujah. I didn't hear that King dude. I was so happy. But I got in the car and I looked in the mirror and I had all this gray hair. I went to CVS and Walgreens and I went straight to the hair dye aisle. And I got Revlon 9RB, and I've been a redhead ever since. That child has no idea how he changed my life. But let me tell you something. He's not in the models. The only model that he's in is the model that predicts how many prison beds are going to be done. When Molly Munger, my law partner, and I went around to interview all of the Economic Roundtable, the Milken Institute, Ross Duvall, we have all these wonderful institutes that have billions and billions of dollars to study the economy, and they've got the Anderson UCLA forecast, and you and I are in those models. And Molly and I went to go see if our clients were in those models. Are the people that Caresan and El Rascate serve, the immigrants from Central America, in your model? How about the underclass African Americans who live in Jordan Downs and Nickerson Gardens? I said, are they in it? Each and every one of the economists said, actually, we have no assumptions for the underclass to be in our economic forecasts. That's really all we need to know. When you talk about transforming the politics around poverty, when you talk about getting systemic solutions, when you talk about moving from charity and direct services to talking about the problem and reframing the problem, and heaven knows we can go to Bellagio and we can reframe all these kinds of issues and contemplate poverty, holding summits and convenings, issuing white papers, all of that is good work. But what your foundations understand is that going from charity through direct services into direct advocacy, into impact advocacy, which is where the law firms, MALDEF, PearlDef, AllDef, Stuart Close, Asian Pacific American Legal Center, APALC, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, we come in at that impact level, impact advocacy, which is also controversial to fund. Beyond that, however, is where we need to be looking.